Our News from the Hill segment tonight. Sometimes when the mainstream media tells you a story, they don't tell the truth. Not the whole truth, at least. They leave out certain details that change the whole picture. And that's what they did when CEOs began to quit Trump's business councils following Trump's controversial response to the Charlottesville violence and racist rally. Tonight, we're going to tell you the real story behind the outraged CEOs quitting Trump's council. The truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. With me now, contributor to Conservative Review, Dr. Tom Borelli. Dr. Borelli, good to see you.
Hey, Liz, great to be back.
All right, Dr. Borelli, I want to start out by showing the mainstream media's hysteria over these CEOs that one by one quit Trump's council. Take a look at this.
Presidents suffer politically for waiting too long to blame white supremacists.
I cannot understand why others have not followed Ken Frazier out the door.
And the fact is, those CEOs got pressure from their shareholders, from their boards, from their employees, and from their customers to say, we can't stand next to this president who is embracing neo-Nazis. How is that good for business?
President Trump finally calling out the white supremacists for the deadly violence in Charlottesville, Virginia, but it's too little too late for some of this country's top business leaders who are distancing themselves from the president tonight.
All right, so we know when the mainstream media uses the same phrases, it is a created talking point. It is a narrative handed down from the top of the party, and that should make us suspicious that they are perhaps not telling us the truth here. This is what President Trump himself had to say. Take a look.
They're not taking their job seriously as it pertains to this country. We want jobs, manufacturing in this country. If you look at some of those people that you're talking about, they're outside of the country. They're having a lot of their product made outside. If you look at Merck as an example, take a look where, take a look at where their product is made. It's made outside of our country. We want products made in the country. Now, I have to tell you, some of the folks that will leave, they're leaving out of embarrassment because they make their products outside. And I've been lecturing them, including the gentleman that you're referring to, about you have to bring it back to this country.
All right, Dr. Borelli, so that's the mainstream media narrative. That's President Trump's reasoning that he thinks why they left. You have a third hypothesis here, and you say it has nothing to do with Trump's Charlottesville response. Why is that?
Well, ultimately, Liz, it's really about policy. It's about the policy that President Trump wants to bring to the American people. A lot of these CEOs really got spoiled under former President Obama. Remember his economic stimulus plan? Well, these CEOs knew if they went to Washington, they got policy favors. General Electric, for example, got tens of millions of dollars in grants from Obama's stimulus plan. Electric car company Tesla, they got almost a $500 million loan to start their company. These CEOs were spoiled. And what was one of the first things that President Trump did? He pulled the U.S. out of the Paris climate change agreement, despite a lot of these CEOs lobbying. And right after he did that, Elon Musk, the head of Tesla, pulled himself out of one of the advisory boards, as well as CEO Bob Iger from Disney. So ultimately, this is about policy. These CEOs are spoiled. They're global elites. They're part of the ruling class. They love the establishment. They all went in with Hillary Clinton, and they were horrified when all of a sudden they have a president of the United States that's worried about the hardworking men of the United States.
Right, and that's an interesting point you make, I think, because a lot of these CEOs did donate to Hillary. Their big business revenues, they contributed directly to the Democratic Party in exchange for favors from Democratic politicians. So you're saying you think their expectation in joining these advisory councils wasn't really to help Trump with the policies that he campaigned on, but they thought that they would be able to maneuver in some way favors from the president by being on those boards?
Oh, absolutely. That's the way Washington works, and that's the way those big companies have been spoiled. Again, one of the first things that President Trump did was pull the U.S. out of Trans-Pacific Partnership. Every one of those global companies loved that idea. Their lobbying probably didn't help them on that either. And remember, also, a lot of these companies donated to the Clinton Foundation. That was another way where they had developed a relationship with the Clintons. So again, they're expecting business as usual. And as we know by now, with President Trump, it is not. He's worried about the forgotten men and women of the U.S.
Right. So this is so interesting, though, because if what you say is actually true, and it seems to me that it's more logical than perhaps either of the two other explanations, certainly not the mainstream media's. Trump's, I think, holds some water. But this actually, your hypothesis here makes the most sense to me, because what you're saying is that Charlottesville, using Charlottesville as an excuse to leave these councils, was essentially just a scapegoat. These CEOs were willing to resort to race baiting in our nation, furthering the divide, just so that they didn't have to come out and say, hey, we favor big government policies. Trump is scaling back the size and scope and power of the federal government, and we don't want to be a part of that.
No, absolutely. These CEOs have been spoiled for years. They have huge lobbying budgets. They're used to getting their way. And really, they haven't done really great service for the citizens of the United States with respect to, where they choose to manufacture their vehicles. Instead of trying to fight regulations, CEOs will say, well, to hell with it. We'll just build overseas. We'll build in Mexico because that's easier for us. They really lost the fight. And now all of a sudden they have a wake-up call, and they really don't know what to do because President Trump is unpredictable. Thank God. They never know when they're going to find themselves the target of a tweet when they do something wrong, and that really has them terrified.
Right. It's essentially just politically correct virtue signaling. They're acting like they have this moral high ground. Like, we can't be associated with someone who responded to Charlottesville, a racial incident, a white supremacist terror attack, in the way that Trump did, when truthfully, they're just not getting their way. They're not getting the big business handouts that they want. Very, very interesting. Dr. Borelli, thank you so much for sharing that. I appreciate you being on the show.